Welcome to our Sunday gathering, Grace Point. We are so happy that you're here. My name is Nathaniel Green. I'm part of the team here, and it's always a delight, even virtually, to welcome you to this experience. If this is your first time, we hope that you know that you are a beloved child of God, that you are celebrated for who you are, that your identity, who you love, how you live and express yourself, all of those things matter. We're a community of people learning and growing together, being authentic and gloriously imperfect. So thank you for joining us today. We are inherently united with God. We are inherently united with one another, and we celebrate our inherent worth. Today we're going to be diving into the story of Jonah in our Bible Stories for Grown-Up series. Excited about that, excited for a couple little treats along the way. So we're so happy that you're here, and if it is your first time or if you just haven't done it yet, we encourage you to go to gracepoint.net/subscribe, and that'll get you plugged into our newsletter, into all of our social media channels, and into our Facebook group. And we've got some exciting details about what's to come as far as how we connect with one another throughout the course of just being distanced. So keep your ears and your eyes peeled, and we'll have some more on that later. But first, we want to welcome you home. Welcome to Grace Point.
Welcome to Grace Point.
We are a progressive Christian church,
loving our community by gathering in our homes.
Even as we practice social distancing,
we're asking big questions about what it means to be human,
what it means to love our neighbors,
and what it means to follow Christ.
We're cultivating a safe virtual space to deconstruct or reconstruct,
to question and to grow.
We are welcoming, affirming, and fully inclusive.
Because who you are and who you love are celebrated here.
While we may be physically apart from one another,
we believe we're never truly alone.
You are never alone.
We're together in this.
We're together in this. So even though we can't give you a hug just yet,
we want you to know that you are beloved,
You are included.
And you are affirmed.
welcome to Grace Point.
Welcome to Grace Point.
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
God our Father, giver of daily bread, blessing our hands and covering our heads. God our Mother, leading us into peace, drawing in comforting all those in need. Hallowed, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed, hallowed be thy name in all the earth. God our Father, giver of daily bread, blessing our hands and covering our heads. God our Mother, leading us into peace, drawing in comforting all those in need. Hallowed, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed, hallowed be thy name in all the earth.
good morning, Grace Point kids, and good morning, Grace Point youth. I hope you are enjoying a very happy Sunday. As our community continues to meet virtually, we host weekly opportunities for both Grace Point kids and Grace Point youth to connect. GP kids, we know that many of you wake up super early on Saturday mornings, so we host a 10 a.m. Zoom hangout just for you. GP youth, we know that many of you stay up super late on Fridays, and so we host a 6:30 p.m. Discord hangout just for you. Grace Point youth, we also connect throughout the week on our Discord platform. If you'd like an invite to our Discord platform, you can email either Lauren at gracepoint.net or myself, Lisa, at gracepoint.net. Grown-ups, for info on how GPK and GPY gather throughout the week, you can check out our Instagrams at Grace Point Kids TN and at Grace Point Youth TN, and also our Grace Point Youth and Grace Point Kids Facebook groups. Grace Point Youth, if you're watching the Sunday morning premiere and you would like to chat about gathering happenings and Pastor Josh's message, you can jump onto the Discord platform and join the conversation in our Sunday morning chit chat channel. Your Sunday morning discussion guide will also be shared there, as well as on Instagram, Facebook, and by email. GP Kids, throughout the month of September, we are utilizing Deneen Akers' book, Holy Troublemakers and Unconventional Saints, to learn from and to be inspired by people who work for love and justice in their corners of the world. Last week, we learned from Rachel Held Evans' story, and this week we are learning from Bayard Rustin's. You can find links to our Bitmoji classroom as well as our principal guide in your email inbox on Instagram and on Facebook. And I know many of us are back to school, be that homeschool, virtual school, or in person, and parents and those who work in the school system, that means we're back to school too. I hope you are finding moments for rest and for joy throughout your week. All right, peace out, big air hugs, and so much love to each and every one of you.
Hey, Grace Point, I just got a few more announcements for you. First off, make sure you join us this Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Central. We have our Books and Brews gathering for this month, and we're going to be discussing The God Who Sees by Karen Gonzalez. This is a phenomenal book about immigration and faith and her story, in particular the justice area surrounding that. So be sure to check it out. Be sure to join us, even if you just are starting the book or you just got a little bit of the way through. It's okay. No one's going to judge you. Promise. I say that every month, and I really do mean it. We have great conversations, even with people who've only read like 2 chapters. It's okay. So join us Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. We'd love to have you. Last month's Books and Brews discussion was one of the all-time highlights of my time here at Grace Point. Such a phenomenal discussion. So be sure to join us. And if you're into getting to know more people, you want to hang out and discuss faith, theology, all kinds of random subjects, and get in on all the running jokes that I'm out of the loop on, be sure to join us every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Central on Zoom for Reconstruct. This is, like I said, a great chance to talk about theology and all that esoteric kind of faith stuff that is super fun. Josh is a super big theology nerd, so it's a great time. Be sure to join us 6:30 p.m. on Zoom, and you'll always find Zoom links for everything, whether it's parent hangout, kids and youth stuff, all that kind of stuff you'll find at gracepoint.net/calendar. So be sure to check it out and get situated. We've also got a bunch of other fun stuff coming up. Really excited to announce that we're going to be having a community picnic at Sevier Park on September 27th at 4 p.m. We're really looking forward to this. This is our first opportunity to kind of be around each other. We'll be socially distant, physically distant. We're going to wear masks. We'll have hand sanitizer. But you're encouraged to bring your own food, bring your own picnic area. We're going to be hanging out Sevier Park I think it's in the 12 South area. And we'll be there. So 4 p.m. Central, Sunday the 27th. We'll have more details to come, but put that on your calendar. It's our first kind of Grace Point hangout. Again, going to be honoring all the distance, all of the care, all of the mandates, but we want you to join us September 27th, 4 p.m. We're looking forward to that. And also, we want you to know that your giving sustains the work and the ministry, the life of Grace Point. So thank you first for your exceeding generosity, particularly in the last 6 months and all of this change and instability in the world. It's been just incredible to see the Grace Point community's generous support for everything that we're doing, and you make it possible. Grace Point is you. It's not a staff, it's not a building, it's you. We are all Grace Point. So thank you for giving, and if you would like to give today, set up a recurring donation and contribute to the work. We really encourage you to do that. It's really easy. Just text GracePoint to 77977 or visit gracepoint.net/give. There are all sorts of ways that you can contribute to our work and ministry. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Just reach out to info@gracepoint.net. We'll get you set up. So with all of that being said, I also want to make sure, in case you missed it in this last week's announcements, we did provide a second quarter contribution, as we've been doing this year, $1,000 to the Nashville General Hospital's Foundation Food Pharmacy. These serve patients of heart conditions and chemo patients, and this food goes to helping provide meals and provide care, really important stuff. And so if you missed it in this last week's announcement, this is the kind of stuff that you're giving towards. A portion of every gift goes into outreach in our local community. So thank you for making that possible in the tangible ways that Grace Point aids and helps our community. So thank you for listening to all these announcements. And if I missed anything, I'm sure I'll hear about later. But visit gracepoint.net/calendar for more. Thank you.
God, oh God, great and holy, fearing not we come to thee, fearing not the weak and lowly, for your love has set us free. And by the blue sky bending over, by the green earth's flowery home, teach us, Lord, the angel chorus, you are love and love alone. 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 You are. Though the worlds in flames should perish, sun and stars in ruin fall, trust in thee our hearts should cherish. O Lord, be our all and all. And with your name the heavens praising, angels hymn no sweeter tone than the songs our hearts are raising. You are love and love alone. 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 You are. Oh, 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 oh. How perfectly our hearts are made for love. Oh, how perfectly our hearts are made for love. How perfectly our hearts are made for love. You are love and love alone. 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 You are. Oh, 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 oh,
Happy Sunday, Grace Point. It is so good to see you today. Thrilled you're here, especially if you're joining us for the very first time. Wherever you are in the world, whenever you're watching, welcome. We are so glad you're here. And today we're going to continue a series we've been in called Bible Stories for Grown-Ups. We've been in this iteration of the series, we're looking at stories from the Hebrew Bible. And I want to turn today to one of my all-time favorite stories in the Bible. And it's one of my favorite because I think the themes that it speaks to are sort of the overarching themes that the Bible is inviting us to see. And I think the story of Jonah, which we're going to look at today, captures a lot of that thematically, what the Bible is trying to do. This is also kind of a polarizing story for people because it has some sort of fantastical elements to it. Spoiler alert, I don't want to ruin it ahead of time, but if you haven't heard, the story involves a prophet named Jonah who runs away from his call to preach to a specific group of people. He ends up being thrown overboard, and he ends up being eaten, swallowed by a great fish, not a whale, but the text says a fish. And he lives in the belly of the whale for 3 days, 3 nights. That's the story of Jonah. And when we approach this story, for lots of people, that sort of how do you approach it? Is it literal? Is it non-literal? What do we do with it? And I want to touch on a little bit of that today. But I want to get beyond that and ask what the story is trying to say. Now, this story brings up, every time I think about the story of Jonah, I have this memory of a few years ago that keeps popping into my head. And we had, at the church I pastored in Kentucky, we had a Wednesday night group that was really similar to our Reconstruct group, where we just talked about anything and everything. And one week there was a woman who was newer in our church community, and she had joined us, and she was there on Wednesday night. And I cannot even remember why this came up. I can't remember how. It was toward the end, like we're almost done. And the book of Jonah somehow comes up, and I make this throwaway, always dangerous, throwaway comment where I say something like, well, I don't take that story literally anyway. And I could just see immediately that this was not information she had heard before, as I assumed everybody in the group had, because we talked about it before. This was brand new information for her, and I could just see, like, on her face that she was immediately, like, troubled, to say the least. And so we ended our time together, and she started to walk out, and I walked her to the door, and I held up my fist for a fist bump and said, "Are we good?" And she fist bumped me, and I can't remember if she said anything, but she walked out. Just kind of stunned that this story might not be literal, or that I would think that. And as the door closed, I had a friend who was standing beside me, and I looked at my friend and I said, "We are never going to see that woman ever again." Now, the good news is I was wrong. She came back, and that moment, that Wednesday night moment, actually was part of what helped jumpstart her process for reimagining her faith. And now when we talk about it, when it comes up, usually when I'm going to be talking about the story, I'll sometimes send her a message. And now we can laugh about that night and celebrate it as an important part of her journey. So this story is sentimental in a lot of ways for me. But let's take another look at it, and let's ask the question, what would a grown-up faith, a post-critical grown-up faith that wants something that is satisfying to the head and to the intellect, but also that can move us at the heart level. And so let's just begin at the beginning. Jonah 1. The Lord's word came to Jonah, Amittai's son. Get up and go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry out against it, for their evil has come to my attention. Go. So Jonah gets this, the word of the Lord came to Jonah. And by the way, word of the Lord here doesn't mean the Bible. It's not like there was like somebody pulled up with a package and Jonah opens it and it's a scroll, right? This is sort of a charismatic sort of experience for Jonah. He feels like this draw, this calling, that there's a message that he's been given that he needs to share. And we're going to see what he does with that. But first, who is Jonah? Jonah is actually only attested in one place outside of the book that bears his name, and that's in 2 Kings 14. It mentions that Jonah was Amittai's son, which it says at the beginning of the book of Jonah, and that he was from a place called Gath-Hepher in Israel, which is in the north of Israel. It doesn't tell us anything about him besides that. It just sort of mentions him. In the book of Jonah, Jonah is a prophet, but he's also sort of a nationalist prophet. There are different streams of prophets. There are prophets with a universal vision in which God brings everybody to the mountain for a feast. And then the others have an exclusivist vision where God punishes the nations and everybody suffers except for the folks who have been chosen. One final detail before we continue. In Jonah's time, the time when this story is set, and I think I keep saying this, but there's narrative time and then there's contextual time. And narrative time means that it's when the story is set. It's like with Ruth. We know with some confidence that the book of Ruth was written later after the exile, but it's set in the period of the Judges. Jonah is set during the period of the Assyrian Empire when they were ruling the world, but we actually think it was written also after exile. So Assyria was the empire that called the shots, that was actually threatening Israel. The capital city was Nineveh, and it's the very city, the heart of the empire, is where God calls Jonah to preach. And the larger story that you have as a backdrop to this, that in the year 722, the Assyrians actually conquered and deported the Israelites from the northern kingdom. There were two kingdoms, northern and southern. The northern kingdom was composed of 10 tribes, and they've been lost to history. After Assyria conquered them, they ceased to exist as a people, and they were dispersed throughout their empire. So, I mean, realize that when Jonah is being told to go to Nineveh, it's not like he's just being told to go to like Knoxville or something. He's being told, go to this place where these people are your enemies and they are bent on your destruction. And go tell them a specific message. So when this happened, it eventually happened to Judah as well when they were conquered by Babylon. But this is the moment when Jonah is being confronted with, what do you do when you're called to go speak this word? When your enemies are in trouble, when you know that God is going to get them. And then God says, I don't want to get them. Go tell them. Go tell them they need to change their ways. What do you do if you're Jonah? Here's what Jonah does. So Jonah got up. He receives the word of the Lord. He gets up to flee to Tarshish from the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship headed for Tarshish. That's a hard word to say. He paid the fare and went aboard to go with them to Tarshish, away from the Lord. What does Jonah do in response to this calling to go preach, to save his enemies from destruction? Jonah bolts. And can you blame him? Who wouldn't? Who would actually choose to go tell your enemies who are threatening your existence, that they need to repent or they'll be destroyed? By the way, the idea that Jonah thinks that Jonah can go away from the Lord reflects an ancient belief that the sort of deities are territorial. And so when you cross the boundary into another land, another place, it's not just a national border, you're crossing a deity border, right? And so Jonah thinks if he just goes over here, he can run away from the Lord. Jonah boards a boat, headed for Tarshish, which is actually in the exact opposite direction. If Nineveh's here, Tarshish is that way. All right, and he goes in the exact opposite direction. Unfortunately for Jonah, he doesn't outrun the Lord. Back to the story. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, so that there was a great storm on the sea. The ship looked like it might be broken to pieces. The sailors were terrified, and each one cried out to his God. They hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to make it lighter. Now Jonah had gone down into the hold of the vessel to lie down and was in deep sleep. The ship's officers came and said to him, how can you possibly be sleeping so deeply? You ever known somebody who could literally sleep through anything? When I was younger, I have slept through earthquake or two. I've slept through a tornado. I used to be able to sleep that way, not so much as I've gotten older. Get up, call on your God. Perhaps the God will give some thought to us and we won't perish. Meanwhile, the sailors said to each other, come on, let's cast lots so that we might learn who is to blame for this evil happening to us. This is what we do as humans, right? Something bad's happening. We want to find a source to blame. And so they cast lots, which is a way of, sort of drawing straws to see whose fault it is. They cast lots and the lot fell to Jonah. And if you're Jonah, what are you doing right now? You're like, are you serious? I thought I was running away from this, and now I have been singled out. So they said to him, tell us, since you're the cause of this evil that's happening to us, what do you do and where are you from? What's your country and what people are you? He said to them, I'm a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and dry land. Then the men were terrified and said to him, what have you done? The men knew Jonah was fleeing from the Lord because he had told them. They said to him, what will we do about you so that the sea will become calm around us? The sea was continuing to rage. He said to them, pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will become calm around you. I know it's my fault that this great storm has come upon you. So Jonah's response is, yep, just throw me in the ocean. Get rid of me. I'm the problem. The men rowed to reach dry land, but they couldn't manage it because the sea continued to rage against them. So they called on the Lord, saying, "Please, Lord, don't let us perish on account of this man's life, and don't blame us for innocent blood. You are the Lord. Whatever you want, you can do." They picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased its raging. The men worshiped the Lord with a profound reverence. They offered sacrifice to the Lord and made solemn promises, which we've all been there, right? Like, just let me get out of this speeding ticket. Let me pass this test. Let this thing go well. And I promise God, right? We've all probably been there. Meanwhile, the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah. Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, this idea of God, it's a great line. The Lord provided a great fish. This idea of God providing, the Lord providing, is actually a theme that pops up quite a bit in the book of Jonah. And it's actually supposed to, I think it's supposed to be a little comical. It's supposed to make us have a little bit of comic relief. Because here's what God provides in the book of Jonah. God provides a great fish, which swallows Jonah. God provides a shrub, which gives Jonah, at the end of the story, some shelter from the sun. But then God provides a worm, which eats the shrub. And then God provides a dry east wind, which is hot and uncomfortable to kind of scorch the earth around Jonah. So there's sort of this, God's providing, but God is providing all things that Jonah doesn't want and that aren't helping him along in what he wants to do in the world. Now, I also say, in my pre-critical naivete, I imagine Jonah in the belly of this fish. It's a great fish after all. It doesn't say whale, it says great fish, so it's a big fish. But I imagine Jonah just hanging out in the belly of the fish, right? Like maybe and I really imagine this, maybe he hung some pictures on the wall. Maybe he built a fire, created a cozy little reading nook to spend his 3 days and 3 nights. This whole fish situation has inspired a lot of creative interpretation throughout history. And this is just, let's time out. And just for the Bible nerds that might be watching this, so chapter 2 is a prayer poem that Jonah speaks from inside, for deliverance, that Jonah speaks from inside the fish. Now, here's a fun fact about the language in chapter 2. The story begins in chapter 2 verse 1, by talking about the fish it's a masculine word. This particular word, this fish is a masculine fish. In verse 2, it changes the gender of the fish to female. So it read like this: "The Lord provided a great fish, masculine, for Jonah, and it swallowed him, and Jonah sat in the belly of the great fish, still male, masculine, for 3 days and nights. Then from the belly of the fish," and the language, the Hebrew switches to feminine, "Jonah began to pray." And people who were studying this and were reading it in Hebrew were like, how is it that in the beginning the fish there's a masculine word used for the fish, and in the end there's a feminine word? And so they began trying to come up with interpretations that took both of them and made it work. And this is from the Jewish Encyclopedia. "Thus he, Jonah, spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, but he would not pray. God then resolved to put him into another fish where he would be less comfortable. A female fish, quick with young, approached the male fish in which Jonah was, threatening to devour both unless Jonah were transferred to her and announcing her divine orders to the effect. Then Jonah was ejected from one fish into the overfilled belly of another, cramped for room and otherwise made miserable. Jonah finally prayed, acknowledging the futility of his efforts to escape God." I mean, isn't that great? Like this wrestling. I mean, my gut says that there's probably been a scribal error at some point when the Bible's being copied, and that's for the shift in the language. The things we do to try to make all this stuff at times that seems contradictory make sense, instead of just embracing the messiness of it and realizing that the Bible, I think I heard Bart Ehrman say once, the Bible may be inspired, but it's got human fingerprints all over it. And this is one of those situations, I think, where the human fingerprints start to pop up. So Jonah is in the belly of the fish, and he's been hanging out for 3 days and 3 nights, and he decides to pray. And once he prays, at the end of chapter 2, then the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. So he's been in the belly of a fish, maybe 2, depending on how you interpret it. He's vomited out onto dry land, which I'm sure was a lovely experience. And then Jonah decides he's going to go to Nineveh and to give a very reluctant sermon. The chapter 3 and 4 is really, really good literature, and it's really, really interesting. And so I thought today we would do what we did a couple weeks ago. We'd have a reader's theater. We brought the whole gang back from the last reader's theater, and they're going to read Jonah chapter 3 and 4 for us. So take a listen to Jonah chapters 3 and 4, and then we'll come back and dig in.
The Lord's word came to Jonah a second time.
Jonah, get up and go to Nineveh, that great city, and declare against it the proclamation that I am commanding you.
And Jonah got up and went to Nineveh according to the Lord's word. Now Nineveh was indeed an enormous city, a 3 days' walk across. Jonah started into the city, walking one day, and he cried out,
40 days, Nineveh, 40 days, and then you will be overrun.
And the people of Nineveh believed God. They proclaimed a fast and put on mourning clothes, from the greatest of them to the least significant. When word of it reached the king of Nineveh, he got up from his throne, stripped himself of his robe, covered himself with mourning clothes, and sat in ashes. Then he announced,
In Nineveh, by decree of the king and his officials, no longer human or animal shall taste anything. No gazing and no drinking water. Let humans and animals put on the same mourning clothes, and let them call upon God forcefully. And let all persons stop their evil behavior and the violence that is under their control.
He thought,
Who knows? God may see this and turn from his wrath, so we might not perish.
God saw what they were doing, that they had ceased their evil behavior. So God stopped planning to destroy them, and he didn't do it. But Jonah thought this was utterly wrong, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord.
Come on, Lord. Wasn't this precisely what I was saying when I was back in my own homeland? This is why I fled to Tarshish. I know you're merciful and compassionate, patient, kind, full of love, and willing not to destroy things. But at this point, Lord, you may as well take my life from me, because I would be better off dead than to live.
The Lord responded,
Is your anger a good thing?
But Jonah went out from the city and sat down east of the city. There he made himself a hut and sat under it, in the shade, to see what would happen to the city. Then the Lord God provided a shrub, and it grew up over Jonah, providing shade for his head and saving him from his misery. Jonah was very happy about the shrub. But God provided a worm the next day at dawn, and it attacked the shrub so that it died. Then, as the sun rose, God provided a dry east wind, and the sun beat down on Jonah's head so that he became faint. He begged that he might die, saying,
It would be better for me to die than to live.
God said to Jonah,
Is your anger about the shrub a good thing?
Jonah said,
Yes, my anger is good, even to the point of death.
But the Lord said,
You pity the shrub for which you didn't work and which you didn't raise. It grew in a night and perished in a night. Yet for my part, can't I pity Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 people who can't tell their right hand from their left, and also many animals?
Oh man, isn't that just so fun? Lauren, Mandy, Brian, and Cohen, thank you so much. That is just, you guys deserve an Oscar. So Jonah in chapter 3 becomes a reluctant preacher. And he goes, and the people of, the message is not heartfelt. It's like 40 more days and then it'll be, right? He doesn't put there's no emphasis, there's no enthusiasm. He's just sort of he's trying to find the bar so he can just slide underneath it, right? That's what he's doing. And fortunately for Jonah, the people of Nineveh repent, and not only do the people repent, but the animals also participate in repentance. And when they do, God relents on the plan to destroy Nineveh, which makes Jonah furious with God. And this story ends much like the story of the prodigal son that Jesus tells in Luke 15. This story ends with an open-endedness, with Jonah asking God, can't I pity Nineveh, the great city in which there are more than 120,000 people who can't tell their right from their left, and so many animals? End of story. We don't know what Jonah says back. Does Jonah come around? Does he ever get it? Does Jonah eventually say, gosh, you're right, I totally haven't been seeing this the right way? We don't know what Jonah does because we get to decide. Because the question at the end of this book isn't ultimately a question for Jonah. I think Jonah in this story is a literary character that was taken from Israel's past and placed into this context for a very, very parabolic and powerful reason. The question is, what do we do? I think this is the question of the book. What do we do with a God who's far more compassionate and generous than we are comfortable with at times? What do we do with that God? The God who not only loves us, but loves our enemies. The God who makes the sun rise and the rain fall so our crops can grow, and the God who does that also for our enemies. The God who longs to embrace us, and the God who longs to embrace those that we would exclude. So a few takeaways from this story. At first, I think we just need to say this again and again. This story isn't about a fish, right? The fish is a symbol, but it's not the point of the story. Scott McKnight, in his book, The Blue Parakeet, says this: missing the difference between God and the Bible is a bit like the person who reads Jonah and spends hours and hours figuring out if a human can live inside a whale and what kind of whale it wasn't a whale, but never encounters God. The book is about Jonah's God, not Jonah's whale, fish. All right, so first of all, it's not about the fish. It's about something else. It's about this God and this prophet and sort of this tug of war inside of Jonah being drawn to give a sermon that he doesn't want to give because he's afraid of the outcome. Jonah is also a story of reversals. What we expect to happen doesn't. There are surprises that would have been quite shocking to the original audience of this story. All right, it's not Jonah on the boat who cries out to God, and it's this Gentile sailors, not Jonah. These Gentiles who even have to ask Jonah what the name of his God is, start crying out to Jonah's God for help. It's the king and the people of Nineveh and the animals of Nineveh who respond to God in obedience. And it's Jonah, the prophet, who disobeys God's call to go to Nineveh and preach. We expect Jonah to have a change of heart after the whole big fish throwing him up on the beach situation. Like that maybe he had changed his mind about his calling to preach and he was going to go do it and give it his all. And he doesn't. He gives a sermon, but it's very, very, it lacks enthusiasm. It's one of the most half-hearted sermons in history. And then he gets angrier at God when the people respond by repenting. Like they respond to his sermon by doing what he says that they should do, and he's furious about it. I think the Jonah story is here to remind us that our boundaries for who's in and who's out are just that. They are our boundaries. God isn't bound by them. God's love isn't bound by the people we would exclude. I think it was Anne Lamott says, or was it Anne Lamott? You can tell you've created God in your own image when God hates all the same people you do. All right, that tends to be how religious groups function, right? We decide who's in, who's out, and we use God to sort of reinforce that and reinforce those boundaries of in and out, of included and excluded, of pure and impure, of saved and unsaved, right? Like we've done that for years and years. Since humans have humaned, we've been doing this. As the late Rachel Hold Evans said so powerfully, what makes the gospel offensive isn't who it keeps out, but who it lets in. Perhaps the question for us, even those of us who consider ourselves progressive Christians who want to be as loving and compassionate, inclusive and generous as possible, maybe the question becomes, who do I want to exclude? Maybe we also ask the question, what is being asked of me that makes me want to run in the opposite direction? Like, what is it? If I had the sense that my work in the world was to do this, whatever that is, it would make me want to go board a boat and get as far away from that work as possible. Who is it that, if truth be told, deep down, I would never want to admit it, but I would like to exclude them because of this? Right? I think those are the questions the story of Jonah is pushing us into. What are we going to do with our enemies? Right? Because I think one of the central messages of the Bible is if we don't learn to love our enemies, we're in big, big, big trouble. And if Jonah doesn't learn to love his enemies, he's going to get swallowed up again. So based on the kind of Hebrew used in the book of Jonah, scholars date it to after the return from exile. So exile was what happened when the Babylonians defeated and deported the people of Judah. And this would have happened way after the time of this Jonah story. But maybe the story is a way of the author saying, when we failed to act in ways that were just, generous, and compassionate, we were swallowed up in exile. And if we don't learn to act in ways that are just, generous, and compassionate, maybe this story is giving us a warning that if we continue to engage with our enemies in hostility and vengeance, we are in really big trouble. If all we can ever do is draw our lines in the sand and stand against, in partisanship, if all we can do is launch arguments at one another, if we can't find a way to work together to create a better world, a world that is inclusive and works for everybody and is transformative, and everybody has that, if we don't figure out how to do this, if we keep building bigger bombs, if we keep buying more bullets, we are in big, big, big trouble. What are we going to do with our enemies? What are we going to do when we have that sense that we're being invited to a work, to engage in something, to partner in something that challenges our biases and challenges our preconceived notions and challenges just our own willingness to engage in that work? In a sense, that's the warning of the Jonah story. If we continue to be engaged in hostility, if we continue to pursue revenge, we're in really big trouble. May we learn that lesson. May we learn it in such a way that we embody it, that we internalize it, and then we actually begin to live that way in the world. May we not run from our call to love our enemies, even our enemies. And may we embrace a vision of God that is so expansive and so universal that there are moments when it actually makes us a bit uncomfortable, because God's love is expanding, and it expands to those who I would leave out.
Something we love here at Grace Point is to gather around the table of Christ and participate in communion. We believe that we are all equal, we are all loved, we're all cherished and affirmed here at Christ's table. And so we wanted to give you the opportunity to share in that with us today. Whatever elements you have available, we invite you to join us as we read these words together. Come to this table, you who have much faith, and you who struggle with believing. You who have been here often, and you who have come for the first time. You who are at peace, and you who feel despair. We are all part of the human family, and there is a place for us here. Christ invites everyone to the table. May this bread and wine unite us all.
Come all proud, come all greedy, come all liars, come all shamed, come all wealthy, come receive it. To the table, come today. Come all broken, come all needy, come all poor and come enslaved. Come all rulers, come be seated. Come all sinners, come all saints. Come to the table from near and far. Come from the shadows, come out of the dark. There's room at the table. We saved you a seat. Come to the banquet. Come join in the feast. Every race and every nation, come all rebels, come all gay. Come beloved, come to Jesus, to a table full of grace. To the table, come and stay. Come to the table, come eat and drink. There's no inner circle. We all have a seat. Be free at the table. Come let down your guard. You're never a stranger. Just come as you are. Come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Oh, come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Prepared is the table. We're ready to feast. The party is waiting. There's more still to feed. The harvest is ready for you and for me. Go live out your mission to fill every seed. Go live out your mission to fill every seed.
Well, once again, Grace Point, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for celebrating communion with us this week. We're so excited to see you all on the 27th at Sevier Park. It's been so long since so many of us were able to see one another. So come with your mask, come prepared with whatever you need, come prepared to be physically distant, and also come prepared to be with your community and to be able to see one another if you feel like this is a safe thing for you to engage in. We're going to continue at Bible Stories for Grown-Ups next week. We're going to look at the story of Naaman the Syrian. And it's a story that actually, when Jesus references it in the New Testament, which we'll look at, when Jesus references it in the New Testament, he gets in big trouble. So why is that, and what does the story have to say to us? That's what we'll dive into next week. Until then, we love you, Grace Point. Grace and peace be with you.